A sealed courtroom, Reno, Nevada, September 2023. 4 adult children sitting on opposite sides of a legal dispute, and at the center of it, a document their father had tried to change without telling them. Not a business deal, not a hostile takeover. A will. A secret amendment filed in private that would have handed control of one of the most powerful media companies on earth to a single heir. The Murdoch Family Trust, valued at roughly $20 billion, was the prize. Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, News Corp. An empire built across 7 decades, now cracking along the lines of blood and inheritance. The question the court had to answer was simple and brutal. Can a father rewrite the rules of a dynasty alone after the game has already started? To understand what was at stake in that Nevada courtroom, you have to understand the scale of what Rupert Murdoch had actually built, and how completely it dominated the information landscape of the English-speaking world. This was not a regional media group. This was not a family business in the conventional sense. This was a structure that shaped elections, defined news cycles, and moved markets across 3 continents. News Corp and Fox Corporation together controlled properties that reached hundreds of millions of people every single week. Fox News was, by audience measurement, the most watched cable news network in the United States for 18 consecutive years. The Wall Street Journal was among the most influential financial newspapers on the planet. The Times of London, The Australian, HarperCollins. A portfolio assembled through decades of relentless acquisition, regulatory confrontation, and sheer force of will. The mechanism that held all of it together was the Murdoch Family Trust. Established in 1999 and later restructured, it was designed to ensure that voting control of both News Corp and Fox Corporation would pass, intact, undiluted, to Rupert Murdoch's children after his death. 4 of them qualified as beneficiaries: Prudence, from his first marriage, Lachlan and Elizabeth, from his second, and James, from his second as well. Each held an equal economic interest. The trust was, on paper, a guarantee of shared inheritance, equal stakes, equal voice, a dynasty designed to outlast its founder. But the trust had a mechanism that made equality theoretical rather than real. It required the children to act by consensus, and by 2023, consensus among the Murdoch siblings had become functionally impossible. Lachlan, the eldest son, had been named co-chairman of News Corp and executive chairman and CEO of Fox Corporation. He was, in every operational sense, his father's chosen successor. James had departed Fox Corporation's board in 2020, citing disagreements over the company's news coverage, a departure he described, in a statement reported by established media, as reflecting his concerns about what he called a toxic politics being pursued by parts of the Murdoch media empire. Elizabeth had her own complicated history with the family's companies. Prudence remained largely outside the operational structure. The 4 children were, in other words, not a unified bloc. They were 4 people with divergent politics, divergent business interests, and a shared legal document that bound them to one another whether they liked it or not. And in the summer of 2023, their father, then 92 years old, moved to change that document. Alone, in secret, without the knowledge or consent of 3 of his 4 children. Here is what no one outside the family's legal circle knew until it became a matter of public record. In the summer of 2023, Rupert Murdoch petitioned a Nevada probate court to modify the terms of the Murdoch Family Trust. The proposed amendment, according to court filings reviewed and reported by established media, including the New York Times and the Financial Times, would have changed the trust's governing rules in a specific and consequential way. It would have required the other 3 children, Prudence, Elizabeth, and James, to support Lachlan's editorial and business decisions after Rupert's death, under penalty of losing certain financial benefits. In plain terms, the amendment would have converted a trust built on consensus into one built on compliance. 3 siblings would be bound to support the 4th. The dynasty would have a single operational voice, and that voice would be Lachlan's. The three children who stood to lose power were not informed before the petition was filed. According to court documents, they learned of the proposed amendment through the legal process itself. Their response was to contest it, formally in the same Nevada court, triggering a probate proceeding that would spend months under a confidentiality seal before portions of its record became public. The presiding officer in the case was a probate commissioner, Edmund Gorman, Jr., appointed to evaluate the petition. What his eventual ruling would reveal about the process and about Rupert Murdoch's conduct was the detail that transformed a private family dispute into a documented legal finding. Re-engagement beat. Because the question was never simply whether the amendment was legally permissible. The question the commissioner had to answer was whether Rupert Murdoch had acted in good faith in pursuing it. And that distinction, good faith versus bad faith, is where the case became something far more significant than an inheritance dispute. Nevada trust law, as applied to this proceeding, required the trustee to act in the interests of all beneficiaries. Rupert Murdoch, as trustee, had a legal obligation to the trust's 4 beneficiaries collectively, not to one of them preferentially. The proposed amendment, as the opposing children argued in their filings, was not a neutral administrative change. It was an attempt to restructure the trust's power dynamics in favor of one heir, pursued without the knowledge or agreement of the others. The proceedings remained confidential for months, but in December 2023, portions of the commissioner's findings were reported by established media after the court record was partially unsealed. What those findings contained was, by any legal standard, striking. Commissioner Gorman found, according to reporting by the New York Times citing the unsealed record, that Rupert Murdoch had acted with improper motive in pursuing the amendment, and that the amendment itself was not in the interest of all beneficiaries. The petition to modify the trust was denied. But the denial was not the end of the story, because embedded in the commissioner's findings was a second conclusion, one that went beyond the amendment itself and touched the character of the proceeding. The commissioner found, according to the same reporting, that Rupert Murdoch had not been acting in good faith. That finding, bad faith, in a court of law by the trustee of his own family's dynasty, was the detail that no legal restructuring could erase. The word collapse requires precision here. Fox Corporation did not collapse. News Corp did not collapse. The Murdoch media empire, in its operational and financial dimensions, continued to function. Fox News remained on air. The Wall Street Journal continued to publish. The share prices moved, as share prices do, on earnings and advertising revenue and the ordinary pressures of a changing media landscape, not on the outcome of a Nevada probate proceeding. What collapsed was something harder to quantify and, in some ways, harder to recover. The legal fiction that the Murdoch Family Trust was a stable, consensually governed instrument of dynastic continuity. The commissioner's ruling had exposed it as a contested arena, one in which the founder himself had attempted to rewrite the rules unilaterally, had been found to have done so in bad faith, and had failed. The implications for succession were immediate and unresolved. Lachlan Murdoch remained in operational control of Fox Corporation, but the trust that was supposed to guarantee his long-term dominance of the voting structure had just been tested, and the test had produced a finding that undermined the very legitimacy of the attempt to entrench him. The 3 dissenting siblings had won the legal proceeding, but winning a probate case does not resolve a family. Consider what the record now contained. A 92-year-old founder, found by a court officer to have acted in bad faith toward 3 of his 4 children. A trust designed for consensus, now publicly revealed as a battleground. 4 heirs with incompatible visions of what the empire should be and who should control it. And a media portfolio whose editorial identity, particularly at Fox News, had become itself a source of the family's internal fracture. Re-engagement beat. Here is what the financial press did not fully price in the weeks after the ruling. The trust dispute was not a one-time event that could be resolved and filed away. It was a structural revelation. The mechanism that was supposed to make the Murdoch succession orderly had been shown, in open court, to be neither orderly nor consensual. In September 2023, separately from the trust proceedings, Rupert Murdoch announced his intention to step down as chairman of both Fox Corporation and News Corp, handing the Fox chairmanship to Lachlan. The announcement was made via an internal memo reported by established media. Murdoch wrote, according to reporting by multiple outlets, that the time was right for him to move to the role of chairman emeritus. He was 92. The timing, a retirement announced in the same month the trust petition became a legal proceeding, was noted by observers. Whether the two events were connected in Murdoch's calculus is not established in the public record. What is established is that the man who had controlled the most powerful, privately held media voting structure in the world stepped back from his chairmanships at the precise moment his attempt to lock in his succession had been challenged in court. The trust, as of the public record available through established media reporting, remained in its original form. The amendment was denied. The 4 children remained co-beneficiaries. The consensus requirement, the very mechanism that made unified control impossible, remained intact. And Lachlan Murdoch, the designated heir, now faced a future in which 3 of his siblings held equal standing in the instrument that would ultimately govern the empire's fate. As of the public record through established media reporting, the Murdoch Family Trust remains structured as it was before the 2023 petition. The amendment Rupert Murdoch sought was denied. The bad faith finding stands as a matter of court record. Lachlan Murdoch continues to serve as executive chairman and CEO of Fox Corporation. News Corp, under separate leadership, continues to operate its portfolio of print and digital properties. Rupert Murdoch, having stepped down from his chairmanships in late 2023, announced in early 2024 his engagement to Elena Zhukova, his 5th marriage. He was 92. The personal and the dynastic in the Murdoch story have always been inseparable. The 3 children who contested the trust amendment, Prudence, Elizabeth, and James, have not, as of the available record, moved into operational roles within the companies. James Murdoch has invested in media ventures outside the family empire. Elizabeth has pursued independent business interests. Their legal victory in Nevada did not translate into executive authority. It translated into the preservation of the status quo, which is itself a form of power, and also a form of stalemate. The Fox Corporation, in the fiscal year ending June 2023, reported total revenues of approximately $14.6 billion, according to its published financial statements. News Corp, in the same period, reported revenues of approximately $9.9 billion. These are not failing businesses. The empire is not in distress. What is in distress is the question of who it belongs to, and what it will look like when the man who built it is no longer there to hold its contradictions together. The Nevada proceeding revealed something that family dynasties rarely expose in public: the gap between the legal architecture of succession and the human reality of it. Trusts and amendments and probate courts are instruments. They can be designed, contested, and ruled upon. What they cannot do is resolve the underlying question of legitimacy, the question of which heir, if any, carries the authority that comes not from a document, but from the founder's actual will, expressed over decades of preference and action. Rupert Murdoch spent 70 years building an empire on the premise that he alone understood what it needed to survive. The Nevada proceeding was, in a precise legal sense, the moment that premise was tested by his own instrument, and found, by a court officer, to have crossed a line. The lesson the record supports is not about greed or family dysfunction or the corrupting weight of inherited wealth. It is narrower than that, and more durable. When you build a structure designed to outlast you, and then attempt to change its rules in secret to favor one outcome, the structure itself becomes the evidence against you. The document you created to protect your legacy becomes the document that records your failure to act in good faith toward the people you were supposed to protect. That is not a moral judgment. That is what the court found.